In a Tower High, Chapter 3. It ends in 3. The world didn't fall out from under his feet at the sharing of his name, as he had feared. The two hobbits, as Maithros had learned they were called, didn't flee from him in fear either. Instead, Frodo held on to the bottom of his amputated arm and said, "The past is a land that is long ago and far away. You have done nothing but aid us despite being gravely hurt. Sam and I must go on to destroy this evil thing of Sauron's. If you would like to come with us, we would gladly take you with us." Sam nodded at his side. "But if you would rather leave, then we will tell you the way we came." Frodo looked over to the mountain in which dwelled Shelob and the tunnel through which Gollum had led them, before he explained to Maithros the danger that awaited there, if he should choose to take it. "If you would have me go on with you, then I shall come with you, and bring what aid I may. There is no love lost between Sauron and I would see him destroyed if I may. Maithros is determined to aid them in their quest to destroy this item of Sauron. He has lived this long in captivity in order to see this day, it feels, and if by his actions he can help them, then he will. If danger lies in both directions, then he will choose the nobler path to tread this time, despite his curiosity about the spider." "Welcome then to our merry band," said Sam, who was digging through one of the packs. "Let's all eat some more lembas before we make the final push. There's plenty left between the three of us." Lembas recipes have decidedly not improved, despite the many years that have passed since Maithros was last in the unfortunate position of having to eat it with no accompaniment. Sure, it was nutritionally dense, and you could live on it for an extended amount of time in a pinch, but it would make you miserable in the process. Maia and Telu had at one time been trying to develop a better tasting recipe. Frodo insisted on walking when they eventually left their place of temporary shelter. His face is pained in a manner that makes Sam walk with his hands firmly stuffed into his pockets as close to Frodo as physically possible, lest he should slip or fall so that he could catch him. This Frodo tolerated until they reached the steepest part of their descent onto the plain. It's then that Frodo made an expression that Sam describes as one he's seen many a time on the face of Mr Bilbo when facing his cousin Lobelia. He'd also said that it was likely the same facial expression he'd shown the dragon. As much as Maithros wanted to politely inquire as to how exactly Frodo's uncle, who was presumably also a hobbit, had come close enough to a dragon to show any sort of facial expression to the dragon, he suppressed the urge. If what they were about to do didn't kill them, then there would be time for dragon stories later. Frodo was showing that look not to a dragon, but to the mountain ahead of them, one that spewed fire from familiar-looking fissures in the rock. As they descended into the plain before it, the thousands of black dots below them became clearer, numberless orcs that stood between them and their goal. That was probably the moment Sam first truly felt despair in their mission, but Maithros stood beside him and offered what bolstering words he may. "They are gathering towards the gate. It seems that you could have chosen no better time to carry out your task. Fate is on our side," Frodo whispered, before he fell not soon after, sliding a small distance in front of them on the disturbed gravel. He didn't have the strength to pull himself back up, so Sam rushed to carry his friend again. Maithros would offer to be the one to carry Frodo. His weight would be less of a burden for him despite his own current physical state, but carrying Frodo seems to give Sam a sense of purpose that he would not take away from him. Still, to lighten his load, Maithros sneakily took Sam's pack from him and had his free arm slotted through both of the straps before he could do so much as protest about it. Covered in dark ash and small pieces of pumice, the plain seems to stretch on forever. The heat radiating from it hurts Sam's feet. Even the durable nature of hobbit feet have their limitations in regards to walking on ground hot enough to fry an egg on. Maithros's feet must be blistering beneath him, but he walks as if he's taking a leisurely stroll through green hill country. They were using up too much of the water, even though the elf refused to take more than the smallest of sips whenever Sam offered him any. Frodo sweated profusely and complained of debilitating pain inside of his head. Whether that is because of the dehydration, or maybe because of the ring's growing desperation the closer they draw to the mountain, Sam cannot tell. The skin of Frodo's neck bled sluggishly from the weight of the ring's chain that burrowed into it under the ring's weight. Even Sam can feel that it continued to grow heavier with each step. Impossibly so for its size, but then it's a cursed piece of jewellery made by a Dark Lord, who had poured quite a bit of malice into it from everything Sam's heard from people wiser than himself. Maethros's frown deepened at the sight of this new injury to Frodo, who has begun to grow weaker and paler rapidly. Sam wanted to sprint with Frodo in his arms so that they might get to the heart of the mountain just that little bit faster, so that Frodo might suffer just a little less before all is done. The elf fished out a miraculously somewhat, mostly clean handkerchief from the bag he had taken upon himself to carry. Soft light blue fabric with embroidery on one of the corners of cowslip flowers. Pippin's handkerchief, Sam notes. Together, they wrapped the fabric around the chain which held the ring, at the point where it bit deepest into Frodo's flesh. Though his distress heightened at their contact with it, Sam felt no more compulsion to touch the ring itself than when he had personally worn the chain himself. Maethros seemed to be just as unaffected as he was, though the hobbit made sure to keep an eye on him all the same. After Boromir's corruption by it, there was no telling what might happen, especially if Sauron clued into what they were trying to do. "There now, Mr Frodo. It's all wrapped up nicely, and for a while it should hurt you less than before," Sam soothed. He made sure to thank Maethros, too, for his thoughts as to Frodo's comfort. It felt like they had been walking forever, maybe days, though it was possible that only a few hours had passed since they escaped the tower. There was neither the light of the sun, the moon, or the stars by which to track the passage of time, only their increasing number of footprints in the black sand, and the slowly increasing size of the mountain that had begun to loom over them. The orcs were quickly making their way to the gates, as Maethros had pointed out before. Whatever fell deeds they were headed into, in such number, made Sam shudder to think about. But they also brought this new fellowship great luck, as they were able to skirt around the straggler packs of orcs and trolls that were hurrying to catch up with the main force. It added time to their final approach and caused the path to snake back and forth, but it was safer. When they were finally unlucky enough to draw the attention of some orcs that were all but dragging their heels after the main force, Maethros rushed in, dispatching of them with ferocity and skill. Sting looked no larger than a kitchen knife in his hands, and yet, despite the awkward grip, Maethros used it well. They walked non-stop to the mountain after the first fight. There is no cover that will protect them, and an entire army that needs only one orc to turn around and see their odd shapes in the distance, and everything will have been for naught. Rest finally came at the foot of the mountain when they reached it at last. Sam's arms shook as he was finally able to put Frodo down on a somewhat soft patch of fine pumice, and Maethros slept with his eyes closed, wedged firmly between two rocks where he had fallen. Lingering here too long would be ill-advised, but none had the strength left to climb the mountain. So they rested, hoping to gain enough strength to begin the ascent. Mount Doom was no small hill in the Shire, taller and steeper still than Caradhras the Cool. Caradhras the Cool! Taller and steeper still than Caradhras the Cruel. Two sides of a coin were they in Sam's mind, one bitter cold and the other boiling hot. With no one else to stand watch over them, Sam dared not sleep despite the way his eyelids threatened to close with every passing second. He could not sleep when they were so exposed to the enemy, or his body would fail him if he did not rest, so the hobbit laid down between Frodo and the rock that separated them from Maethros, and waited for the elf to wake. He would sleep then. It might be night, Sam guessed when Maethros finally awakened. Somehow it seemed even darker than before. A strange gloom hung over them as they ate more lembas. Despite having slept, Frodo's dreams were filled with dark torments, and he woke with bruised-looking eyes and barely enough strength to hold himself up and chew. A hobbit going off of their food is a terrible sign, one that Sam takes note of and adds to his list of things to worry about. Both he and Maethros tried to encourage Frodo to eat more of the elven way bread, but he was so weak that he choked, trying to swallow even the smallest of bites long chewed over. Sam panicked, frozen, unable to think of what to do to help him. It's lucky that they have Maethros there with them, for he simply picked Frodo up from the ground and placed him head down along the length of one of his impossibly long legs, and he hit the choking hobbit on the back with his hand until he used his stump to stop Frodo from falling. To Sam's shock and horror, A piece of lembas came flying out of Mr. Frodo's mouth and fell down to the ground several feet away. "Everything out?" Maethros asked before he righted him, and gently placed Frodo back where he had been sitting previously. "Thank you," Frodo replied, still a little breathless, but his colour had returned to its normal pink hue. Sam offered him a drink of water once he had had his breath fully back and wasn't at risk of choking again. "Sorry for hitting you quite so hard, Frodo, but that's the best way to get something stuck out. Take it from me, the amount of times I had to do that for my younger brothers as children." His eyes were glazed again with past memory, and the two hobbits left him alone until he returned back to the present. "Once," Maethros said, his eyes firmly placed on the mountain summit, "I was chained to the side of a similar mountain. By the time someone found me, I couldn't swallow solid food either." He sounded on the edge of tears as he looked down at his stump. "They had to make soup out of the lembas to feed me." Sam still had a pan, brought all the way with him from home, and there was no need for a fire. The ground itself was hot enough to make a lukewarm soup for Frodo. Maethros fished out the one spoon that remained from Bag End's cutlery set the two hobbits had left the Shire with. Frodo's hands were shaking too much for him to feed himself with this strange brew, so his Sam gently folded his own fingers over Frodo's curled around it and helped to stabilise the spoon. The lembas dregs in the bottom of the pan began to dry out again, just as Frodo had eaten his fill. Considerably more food had just gone into Frodo than Sam had been able to coax into him since LOTR. "Mr. Mayfrost, thank you for your culinary advice," Sam said to the elf who was rubbing the end of his stump with his good hand and frowning down at it ferociously. "I'm glad that my misadventures have some use." Maethros helped them clean up their temporary campsite, peeling the dried lembas out of the pan and wrapping it up in one of the dry, empty leaves that they still carried. With so little food, it was vital that they not lose even this. After all traces that they were ever here were erased from the area, the only thing left to do was begin the ascent proper. Sam carried Frodo again, because although he had regained some of his strength after eating, it was not enough to climb the side of a volcano. Sam carries Mr. Frodo. Frodo carries the ring. Maethros carries everything else. They were only a small way up when Maethros put his index finger up to his lips and then surreptitiously looked down behind them. Following the path of his eyes, Sam could easily make out below them the form of Gollum as he sneaked his way up beside them. Gollum has been following them now for months. Gandalf had pointed out the creature stalking them in the darkness of Moria. Who knew when he had found their trail? Sam understood that Frodo sees something in him worth saving, some glimpse of a future that might have been his uncle's or even his own, but Gollum's betrayal on the stairs, and in leading them into the lair of the spider, cannot be forgiven. Cannot be forgotten. He had gone too far for Samwise Gamgee to ever forget what had been done. No one put Mr. Frodo's life in danger without getting the oldest son of Hamfast Gamgee as an enemy for life. "That there is Gollum. He was once something like kin to Mr. Frodo and I, but he found the weapon of the enemy many years ago, and it has done its foul magic on him ever since. Once he was our guide, but he betrayed us. I think only evil can come out of him on our climb," Sam explained. Frodo merely closed his eyes and nodded his head, both reluctantly and gravely. "He's been following us since we left the tower." There was stiffness to Maethros's shoulders as he looked apologetic that he had kept the information to himself so long. Sam wondered whether he was still expecting them to abandon him. "He's been following us since Khazad-dûm," Frodo sighed, rubbing at his neck where the chain had already begun to bite into his skin once more despite the buffer of the handkerchief. A red stain slowly soaked its way across the pale blue fabric before their eyes. Maethros sighed, shifting to watch Gollum climb still higher in his pursuit more openly before looking up at the ground they are yet to cover. There was no way that with Frodo's increasing weakness, the closer they drew to the summit, that they would make it there before he intercepted them. Sam could see the thought forming in his eyes and shook his head. "Give Sting to me now, Mr. Mayfrost. I see as there's a great deal left to climb. What with you having longer legs and all, I'm a-thinking you'll be faster at the climbing than little old me," the blonde hobbit said. Maethros found himself being bullied by one tired hobbit into carrying the other and relinquishing his hold on the short sword. There was no doubt that Sam was stubborn, Frodo also, They wouldn't have come so far without personalities like that, given the little of their quest Maethros had learned or guessed so far. "Don't you stop now," Sam demanded. "Not for nothing. The ring's mighty unhappy this close to its end. It's going to try and make you do something to keep it alive, but you have to keep going. I will guard the back." It's more than the weight of a hobbit Sam has placed in Maethros's arms. The oath now so deeply embedded in his being demands that he forsake this quest, but the light of the tiny vial shines through the thin fabric of his raiment, and it's just enough for him to fight it. The ring whispers evil thoughts to dash Frodo upon the rocks, to take it and regain the Silmarils and Maglor, to wrest his family from Namo's timeless halls, to return everything to as it once had been. But the past was gone, never to be regained. He was tired. All he really wanted to do was go home to his mother, and for her to hold him as she had done when he was an elfling beneath the mingled light of the trees. For that to happen, he needed to make himself worthy enough that the Valar would let him back across the sea or die trying. Sam had dropped back as Maethros wrestled with such thoughts, and he could hear the telltale sounds of a fight below them. There was plenty enough orc corpses in the tower for him to know Sam is capable of holding his own. With every step, Frodo grows heavier and heavier as the ring tries desperately to thwart them. The ground is hot enough that it burned his feet, charring them just as badly as the Silmaril had his hand, but he gathered what strength he still possessed and all but sprinted to the glowing opening into the mountain. It had likely once been a secondary vent, but a significant amount of work had gone into fashioning it into a domineering entrance. Almost there, he cries out as Frodo's eyes begin to roll in his head, and a stream of blood trickled from his neck. They stepped into the chamber and were hit with a wall of heat that knocked the elf to his knees. Frodo tumbled out of his arms, only to start pitifully crawling to the edge of the walkway they found themselves on. Out of the frying pan and into the fire indeed, Frodo chuckled to himself before he broke into a fully blown, disturbed-sounding fit of laughter. The image of his own brother's despairing face came to Maethros through the light of the magma below them casts. He retched either at the memory or the smell. No burning wood is this, but the roiling innards of the world. Ear's own blood brought forth. When he looked at Frodo again, he was no longer crawling, but stood firmly on his furry little feet. In his hand dangled a plain-looking gold ring upon a silver chain. Maethros had known it was a ring since helping wrap the handkerchief around it, but he had unfortunately been distracted by monitoring their odd stalker's approach. He hadn't noticed the telltale signs of his nephew's art upon it, not done in his own hand. No, this was entirely too inferior in make for it to have been made by Telpi. Even if he'd been forced against his will, even under torture, Telpi couldn't make anything this ugly to look at. No, Sauron had stolen the designs of his innocent nephew, his enthusiasm for his craft, his trust, and the secret techniques handed from father to son's son. Rage welled in Maethros's chest. This is what Telpi had suffered so much for. This is what Sauron had stolen his craft for. A weapon, a ring. His jailers had told him of Telpi's end. Back when anyone had remembered that he existed here at all, they had come to mock him for the various atrocities that had fallen upon what was left of his family house and its people. Telpi had not died a clean and easy death. Frodo turned, and his face, half illuminated, half in shadow, slackened for a mere seconds, before a sickening smile took over his face. In the distance, over the sound of the rock which bubbled beneath them, he could still hear Sam as he fought Gollum on the slope. They are so close to the end of Sauron, or the end of everything. Frodo needed only drop the ring into the pool below them, and everything will be over. Sauron will, at last, truly be defeated, as much as a Maia can ever be. Frodo walked closer to the edge of the platform. They were both standing on. His feet seemed like they were made of lead, so strenuous the movement seemed, as if he was fighting against some invisible enemy. The ring still fought with the Kinslayer too. Desperate to survive, it spoke to him of the Silmarils again, of finding Maglor and diving into the depths of the ocean, drilling into the crust of the earth and flying into the sky. Such promises it could not fulfill. Even reunited with his ring, Sauron would not regain his power of old. He was diminished without Morgoth at his side, and he had never been one to keep promises even then. Sauron was a mousetrap, laden with cheese. Maethros was a seasoned veteran of the Umayya's games. He could see the trap long before it was sprung, and had no intention of stepping into it again. Not today, Not right now, and definitely not when Frodo needed to pull him out of the one he had fallen into. Frodo reached to lift the chain from his neck, and the makeshift bandage fell from it. The once blue fabric now stained red, and the dark brown of dried blood lay crumpled right on the edge, ready to tumble down into the lava at a moment's notice. Even the smallest updraft of hot air would make it topple. His hobbit companion, he desperately wanted to call him friend when they had barely known one another for more than a day, looked just as fragile, just as ready to let go of himself. His final defences against this tainted manipulation of Sauron were crumbling. Maethros could see it in his eyes. Frodo's fingers were small, no larger than that of a human child or an elfling's, but the ring looks like it was made to fit his finger. The ring shone in the light of the molten rock, and Maethros almost thought that he saw in its reflection a great eye wreathed in flame, as Frodo seemed to slip into some sort of trance, reaching out one of his small fingers as if he were about to wear it. Maethros might not know exactly what would happen if the hobbit wore it, but a magic ring forged with the stolen knowledge of his nephew to be a weapon for Sauron would not end well. "Frodo!" he shouted across the short distance he's made sure to keep between him and the hobbit, in case Sam should prove unable to stave off Gollum and Maethros is the last line of defence. "You must resist it a little longer, Frodo." Frodo's eyes turned to look at him, but his hands did not stop their movement in the slightest. Everything feels like it's moving faster than he can comprehend, but also slower than the age of the earth, simultaneously. There's this tiny patch of time available to him, something barely big enough to call a strip, where the fate of the world lies hanging by a thread. He doesn't know what to do. What can one person do? And then the words just fell into his head, as if someone had scooped out all his thoughts only to replace them with the answer he's been seeking. And Maethros sings. He sings in a way the elves haven't sung since the end of the First Age. The roof of the magma chamber is a concert hall ceiling. The walkway is his stage, and the whole world is his audience. If there was anything other than the song within him, he might wonder if this was how Finrod felt, how Luthien sang before Morgoth. But there is nothing other than the desperate need to sing this song. He sings of the power that corrupts, that steals and breaks, of treasures and oaths, those kept to bitter ends, and those broken, and war that came from those foolish enough to force them to be upheld despite the cost, of cities that lie in ruin, of blood that is diluted by the sea, of the dead and the dying and the great forests burning. In this strange half-darkness, Maethros sings of a family that supports one another and loves so deeply it's destroyed them, how even the living lie in shattered pieces, memories of home that cannot be taken from the good by capture or threats of torture, of freedom, of fields of barley beneath the sun, and feasts and dancing, the bonds of friendship, of an ending to the weight carried on shoulders too small to carry their burden, but who carry it anyway because there is no one else who can, and pain that fades into nothing but a distant memory. All Frodo needed to do was let it go. Let the chain slip through his fingers, link after link, until it fell from them into the fire that roiled beneath. And yet, the effort to do so was gargantuan. Whether Frodo still had the strength left in him to do so remained to be seen. The walls of the mountain rang with Maethros's words. His regrets and his fears are added into it too. "Do not fall to madness as I once did," he prayed. "Do not doom all you love to destruction, for a treasure that cannot love you back. Remember where you came from. Remember." Frodo fell once more to his knees, and he screamed. He screamed from somewhere so deep inside of himself that Maethros felt like he could feel the very air shake with the power of it. But he did not let that stop his song, that was lying on the end of his tongue, demanding to be brought forth into the world by him. Maethros sings of his torture at the hands of Sauron, of his missing hand, of his love that died upon the field of the Nirnaeth, and his hair as dark as a raven's wing, filled with golden ribbons. He sang of Telpi and the lies of Sauron, of his cruelty to one who only wanted to make good things and separate himself from the destruction wrought by the Silmarils, of the people waiting out there in the world at large for true freedom and safety that Frodo could give them if he'd just let the ring go. Anything to hold on to, anything to remember Frodo of their shared hate of Sauron, anything to help him remember the good things that they could still save. Love this world enough to save it, Maethros pleaded desperately in the fabric of the music, or hate Sauron enough to spite him with his destruction. Renewed screams from Frodo's uncontrollably shaking form almost knocked Maethros out of whatever trance has brought the song's words to him. He wanted to run to Frodo and pull the ring from his fingers, but something within him says this had to be Frodo, that no one else could do this. He began a new verse as the very rock itself vibrated with the power emanating from the words. The great eyes the great eyes gaze finally fell upon them. The great eyes gaze finally fell upon them. It burned Maethros's fear to have it focused upon him. Sauron finally knew who they were and what they had done here in Mount Doom, the place he had thought the most safe. They were both screaming now. Sound and song dissipated on the wind that whipped around the platform, leaving only the words of an infuriated Maia in their place. Maethros stuffed his fingers of his one remaining hand into his corresponding ear and flattened the other one into his shoulder as Frodo somehow regained enough power over his body to throw the ring at last. The song was neither as beautiful as Maglor could have made it, nor as strong as the power Luthien had once wielded, but it worked. It had worked. Crushing is the weight of the eye's gaze as it flattened the elf almost to the floor beneath it, squeezing out what air is left in Maethros's lungs. Beneath them, the surface of the magma pool broke up beneath the weight of the ring, and it slipped below the surface. His connection to the place of song failed, snapping back to whatever place it had come from. The weight lifted, and the burning eye's fire went out like a begetting day candle. It was over. Sauron, the enemy of the free peoples of Middle-earth, was gone, at last. How they managed to get out of there alive as the magma level rose, Maethros will never be able to truly understand. Not even centuries later, when Aule himself had drawn a very detailed diagram to help him. But they do escape. Maethros ran with Frodo held securely in his arms, and together they sped down the mountainside, headed towards the place that they had last seen Sam. He might still need their help. He could still be fighting Gollum. He could be injured. They were within sight of one another when the mountain blew up, and then everyone was left frantically scrambling for higher ground. It was a mad dash that ended with Frodo, Sam and Maethros all collapsing on the same rocky outcrop, laughing hysterically about just everything they've been through to get here, only to be melted by lava. For Maethros, this is the second time he's looking at death in lava as one of the few options left open to him. Contemplating that only made everything all the funnier. That it was a laugh that might very well kill him, because Maethros cannot even sit himself up right now, only makes him laugh more. There wasn't any way to escape now. The lower slopes were awash with lava, and above them there was only sky. A wind was blowing from the west. It smelt of something green and growing like newly crushed grass beneath the feet of children in the summertime, something Maethros had ceased to hope for long ago. He hadn't seen a plant of this kind longer now than he had been alive before his imprisonment. Softly, slowly, the wind blew from the west, and with it the thick clouds that had for centuries hidden the land of Mordor from the sun, moon, and stars began to be chased away. Maybe they would be able to see the stars one last time before they die. That would be nice. It's not that bad dying like this, he thought as the hobbits talked to one another. His ears were ringing too loudly to make out their conversation, but you can see the burden that has fallen away from Frodo and the relief in Sam's. Glimpses of starlight poked their way stubbornly through the clouds as they drifted by. Shiny specks of light, long beloved by the Eldar who walked beneath them long ago, at the edge of a great lake lost to them forever. But among them is the Silmaril. It greeted him with a familiar twinkle, comforting in its presence like his father was watching over him. The stars are very beautiful tonight. The words stumble their way out of Maethros's numb-feeling lips, and he lays down in order to better see them. Not at all because his abused body refused to keep him sitting up, at all. One of the Silmarils is out there among the stars, and tonight that feels like maybe it was enough. The sky belonged to the House of Fëanor just as much as it would ever belong to anyone. Atar might understand when he meets him at last in the halls of the dead or the void, that he and his brothers tried their best to fulfill their oath. In the distance, there was the sound of a bird's high-pitched whistling scream. Maethros giggles. It's either one of those fucking huge seagulls or one of Manway's eagles. Maethros's eyes were slowly closing. There's someone riding an eagle to come and get him. Now he was absolutely sure he was, in fact, dying. Fingon. The name slipped from his lips unbidden. Fingon had come to take him to Mandos. He was saving him again. It's extremely awkward when he wakes up, isn't dead, and Elrond is glaring at him from the foot of his bed, held up by twins that could only be his sons. Ones that bear an almost uncanny resemblance to Elrond and Elros, to the point where Maethros's painkiller-filled brain is tempted to ask Elrond whether he birthed them through parthenogenesis. He decided against it. Best not to ask awkward questions immediately upon their reunion. Nice of you to finally turn up, Ator, his once foster son said before promptly bursting into tears. First a hobbit brings me Iranion's shield, I never thought to see again, and now another brings me you. Sam's responsible for both, Maethros attempted to joke, but his little Elrond jumped into his bed, flattening him like a pancake. Maybe he shouldn't be calling him little quite so confidently anymore. Author's note. This fic was inspired by following two songs mashed together by my brain in what I can only call severe sleep deprivation. The nursery rhyme "There Was a Princess Long Ago" and "The Lay of Gilgalad" by Anois. Together, there was a period of time last week when my chronic pain only let me sleep for 4 hours in a 72-hour period. I'm blaming that for this. The end. Thank you for listening.